Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals. I'm your host, Drew B. Wilson. With more than 2 decades in sales, I've seen it, been through it, heard about it. Now I'm bringing it to you, my favorite people in the world, the sales community. Because let's be honest, this is the greatest job on earth. Doesn't matter where you come from, what background, what personality type, you can carve out an amazing life for yourself in sales. And today's guest is no stranger to that journey. He's got some cool stuff to share with us today. So I need you to help me welcome Jeremy Hurewitz. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm excited for you. We were chatting about before the show started. I know we've got some interesting topics, but I want to jump right into your craziest sales story.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, listening to the podcast, which is terrific, by the way. And I think I want to tell one that it leads off my book that's not specifically mine, but it's so extraordinary. And it's kind of an almost sale, Drew, but I hope you'll kind of humor me here. So the person who wrote the foreword to my book is a really amazing public servant named Bob Grenier. Bob was in the CIA for many years, and he was actually the station chief in Islamabad, Pakistan when 9/11 happened. And he was the first U.S. official to meet with the Taliban a few days later. And in the foreword to my book, he describes almost making a sale that could have changed history. And he thought he did it when he met with a really senior Taliban official and spent hours and hours with this individual, trying to convince him to give up both Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden. And he had basically had a handshake agreement. Now, I'm sure many folks who listen to this podcast have been close to the finish line like that, only to see something else happen last minute. That's what happened here. This Taliban official came back to his base in Afghanistan, and we don't know exactly what happened, but he decided to not close the deal. So history happened as we know it, but it was the sale that almost was. And my book's full of kind of, little anecdotes like that, but I just think it's a really colorful one. So I thought I'd lead off with that.
Yeah, that's, it's such an interesting perspective when you're like, all right, this is a done deal. We're locked in. Everything's going to happen. They got the verbal, you got the handshake, and then something happens. Life be lifing, as I always say. And so it's so interesting to me because like a lot of times those sales, there's always a reason. And what I love about, kind of looking at your profile and learning a little bit about you before we jumped on the call, I mean, you got a very interesting perspective when it comes to sales. And so I'd love to, kind of dive in on the fact that basically you work with Spies for all intents and purposes, and you're leaning in on how you can help them with the main points of sales, right? Building rapport and influence. And so how did you even fall into that category?
Yeah, thanks for all that. There's a lot to say there. Just real quick, I started my career off overseas as a journalist based out of Prague and Shanghai for a decade, covering foreign policy and intelligence. But, I always say life is sales. So I had to convince people why they should talk to me, especially in sensitive places like China. And I had to use some of the same skills that good salespeople use as well, like, mirroring and active listening and other things. And coming back to New York, where I was from after that decade abroad, I found the industry known as corporate security and intelligence, which I refer to in the book as the biggest industry that no one's ever heard of. It quietly influences foreign policy and the business world, and it's full of former spies, special forces, FBI, hostage negotiators, and all of that. And I just learned so much from these individuals and had been thinking about this concept of sell like a spy for a while. During COVID, decided, now's the time to do it. And that's what I do. And in terms of the skill set, I like to say that spies are actually the world's best salespeople because there is no harder sale to make than convincing someone to buy into the concept of treason. And the skills that spies leverage to get to yes are really special, and they're really transferable to our careers and our everyday lives. So I travel around the country doing trainings and keynote talks and coaching folks about, how to lean in to use some of these skills to build rapport and connect with their clients and overcome a variety of challenges.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I always try to tell people like sales is relatively easy. It needs 2 things, right? You need empathy. You got to ask good questions. You got to make the person understand that you genuinely care about them in a way that's going to help them achieve their desired result, whether it's getting out of the pain that they're in or achieving the pleasure that they're looking for. And the rest of it's just confidence. Can you be 100% confident in your ability to solve the problem, to deliver the solution? And I would have to imagine that's a big part of kind of the individuals you're referencing, right? The spies, like, that's all it is. It's like, I care about this person. They know I care about this person. And I'm confident that we can get them what they need to be safe or secure. So like, when you're doing your trainings, what are some of the top things that you lean in on from like the rapport building aspect? Let's start there, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
sales professionals, like, they have their script, but it's the authenticity and rapport building that they're struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's come back to some of what you said about like why people buy, if possible. I want to talk about motivation if we have time for it. But there's a variety of things I talk about. And what I liked, first thing I do when I'm talking and training people is, first of all, I make them understand that spies are not James Bond and Jason Bourne, because we need to get away from this world of Hollywood and understand these are just extraordinary individuals with great social gifts that have been deeply refined to, connect with people. And look, as salespeople, sometimes we hit it off with people, right? And that's great. It's really fun in life and in business when you connect with someone automatically. But many times, I don't know about you, but I've tried to sell to people that, I don't particularly like, or clearly don't necessarily like me, or kind of have a chip on their shoulder, don't want to be sold to. Well, spies face enormous challenges like that, okay? So they're trying to sell, if you will, to criminals, terrorists, diplomats from some of the worst regimes in the world. And they have to establish a real rapport to connect with that person and do what you said, show empathy and show that they care. So I like to talk about radical empathy, which is the idea that everybody, I estimate, that there's 99% of humanity has at least a kernel of humanity. So you have to dig deeper and do. There's a quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. I'm not sure if he actually said it, but he supposedly said, "I don't like this person. I must not get to know him better." So you really need to take it as a challenge, because our first, human beings seek comfort. And I do a lot with behavioral science. And, when we find somebody rubbing us the wrong way, our idea in our head is just to go the opposite direction or confront them. And spies know that, hey, if I'm going to recruit this, diplomat from North Korea or Iran who might have values totally different than mine, I have to kind of get on their level. So finding ways to unearth that is really key. I could ramble on a long time about this, but the only other thing I'll add here, well, I do want to mention mirroring, and I talk about physical mirroring, which is really important, but then I add in the component of verbal mirroring, which is something used by FBI hostage negotiators quite a bit. And I worked in the space of kidnap for ransom consulting, so I work with these individuals, and they have incredible skills. And so using the subconscious to get people to understand that, hey, I'm on your side. I'm using some of the same language. I'm sitting in a similar posture. I'm using similar gestures. There's a whole technique in using that and not overusing it that's important, but that's an important one to consider as well. And then finally, and I have a very personal story in my book about this, but leveraging vulnerability is a slightly more unorthodox way, because we want to be somewhat formal. We want to be fun, but we're in the business world. Sharing something about yourself that makes you vulnerable might not seem like the ultimate move, but spies know that we respond to those kind of things in kind. And someone who might be treating me at arm's length, might respond when I share something very, significant about myself. They respond in kind and then tell me something. And we've bridged what I call an intimacy gap in that way. So using your emotional intelligence and finding, and it can be a small thing too. It doesn't have to be a cancer diagnosis, God forbid, it can really help you to connect more deeply. So I really try to specialize in providing these unorthodox, outside the box tools for salespeople to build rapport and connect.
Yeah, I really love that. Mirroring is something that is, I'm gonna say personally, I had early on, and I remember people mentioning to me, it's like, "Oh, you're great at mirroring," and I didn't quite understand it. But the more I researched it, the more I looked into the skill set. There is such a great nuance to that, because it lets the prospect or the individual you're speaking with know that you're actually listening, right? And this is something that so many people are terrible at doing in sales. So I'm calling you guys out if this is you.
For
But they're
sure.
using, keywords like, "it made me angry." And then, you'll respond back, "Well, what made you frustrated about that?" And this, angry and frustrated are two different things. And so the nuance of being able to say, "Well, what made you angry?" or "tell me more about how that made you feel," and kind of developing the ability to use that similar language, not like you said, too much where it's overwhelming and they're like, "Oh, this guy's being weird,"
Yeah.
but using those subtle cues to let them know you're listening, that you understand. The understanding piece, I think, is a big part of it, because like that tells them you're on the same level, the communication is there. And especially for phone sales, where body language is a big part of communication, you don't have that. So
Right.
being able to listen well and mirror those words makes a big difference, and the ability to listen and understand that is huge. Now I want to go back to what you had kind of talked about from a motivation standpoint, because I think this goes really well with the mirroring as well. Like, if you know someone's motivations, you know what words to mirror, what cadence or tonality. So talk a little bit about the motivation side and kind of like where your perspective is.
Yeah, thanks. That's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. And I think, salespeople are often confident individuals, and salespeople are like, hey, look, I have a great product or service. I'm a charming person. They should want to buy from me. And that's kind of the mindset. And that's good as far as it goes. What spies are really good at is assessing motivation, because if you have an Iranian diplomat and they've learned that that individual has a sick child, and America has cutting edge care that could save the kid's life, that's a motivation, right? You might find out that a diplomat has been passed over for a promotion because they come from a disfavored ethnic group. That's motivation. Money, a variety of different things can motivate somebody. So as salespeople, I don't think we do enough homework on our targets and try to get the atmosphere and try to collect intelligence from people at that company. Who in your LinkedIn network knows somebody at the company that you're at? It doesn't have to be on the same team. How's the company doing? It might be privately held, but can you use your network to find out if the company is doing well or doing poorly? Is the manager of the team, if you look on LinkedIn, have they only been there for 6 months? Maybe there was a power struggle, they prevailed, and they're rethinking all their vendor relationships. So getting under the hood and trying to understand what the difference is there can make the critical difference between getting to yes. Because I often say to people that, look, I'm sure your company is great. I'm sure you have a wonderful product or service, but unless that product or service is totally differentiated in the marketplace, or you have a price point that just blows everybody out of the water, it's salesmanship, it's relationship, it's empathy. These are the things that are going to, help you win. It's the individual who knows, hey, every summer my client goes to this lake house with his kids, or his favorite sports team is this, or she went to college here. The little things that you can remember and understand about somebody can make a critical difference about why they choose you over somebody else in a market that, let's face it, might not be that differentiated.
Yeah, what I really love about that is in our coaching community, we call it social recon, right? Guess what? Social media has all of these places where people are telling you their entire life story, all the good, the bad, the ugly. And if you just take a little bit of extra time and effort to go and research people, as you just mentioned, you might know their sports team, you might know that they recently went on a vacation to some kind of theme park, right? This is all information you can use to build rapport. And I'm not saying be a weird creep about it and be like, oh, I saw that you went to XYZ, but you might find a way to weave into the conversation like, oh, my family and I are thinking about going to the theme park this weekend, so we're super excited about it. And that's going to trigger the thing in their mind that's like, oh, my family and I just went there 2 weeks ago. And then you can say, well, what was your favorite ride? What was your favorite part? I know when we go, we don't want to miss out on those things. And so it creates that, as you said, that emotional gap and brings it
Yeah.
together of like, hey, this person gets it.
And what you
And
just did there, too, if I can just jump in,
yeah,
is
come on.
one of the other really popular skills I teach, known as elicitation, which is a more subtle way to collect intelligence. You don't have to ask questions to find out about people. But if you did the social recon that you just noted, I thought your example was terrific. And it's kind of what I talk about. Instead of walking into someone's office and being like, hey, I saw that you went to this theme park, which is creepy, and, we'll show that you were doing that. But saying, like, yeah, my wife and I are considering taking our kid to, like, a theme park. I was up last night, researching it. I'm just trying to get my head back in the game today. Make something like that might elicit a response that puts you on the same page. And again, the animal side of our brain is, this person is like me. They are similar to me, and we seek comfort. So understanding that, or walking in there being like, oh, I was out late at a baseball game last night, and they go, oh, who's your team? And they're a big Yankees fan or something, So being able to do those kind of things is a really subtle, important way to collect intelligence and curry favor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's such a great way to put it. And again, it doesn't take a significant amount of time or effort to do these things. I mean, you can Google someone's name and their profiles pop up. This information is almost always publicly available, unless they're a spy, in which case they probably don't share all of these things, and that might be a little bit harder. But here nor there, when you're working in the business space, right, business to business, most of these folks, they're on LinkedIn, they have public profiles, they're sharing this stuff out there, they have a Twitter, they have a something, right, that you can go and do a little bit of this. And what's great is it doesn't require you to be a genius to do it. It just requires that extra little effort. And
Yeah.
that's what separates your order taker from a true sales professional, is someone who goes a little above and beyond, who takes that extra time to make sure that the conversation they're developing with this individual, the relationship, it actually has meaning. And so I want to kind of touch back on the vulnerability standpoint, right? You had
Sure.
mentioned earlier about getting vulnerable. And I think it's a skill set for sure. And I think there's a way to go about it that doesn't make you come across as needy or like, oh man, you should buy from me because I'm poor. But like, how do you help individuals like develop the ability to be vulnerable without giving too much or making it awkward?
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do is to tell you my little thing real quick to give you an example of it. So a little over, actually, I'm coming upon the anniversary. It'll be a little over a decade of brain surgery. I had a brain tumor. It was fortunately benign, but it took the hearing from my right side. So I'm deaf in my right ear for a little over a decade. And it's a practical thing that comes up with me. If you're walking on the streets here in New York with me, I'm going to try to dance around you to keep you on my left. If I arrive late because the subway has a problem or something, and and everyone's seated already at a rather loud restaurant, I might ask if I could swap seats with somebody so I have everybody to my left so I can hear what's going on. And that's when I see the power of vulnerability, because when I share this about myself, all of a sudden people respond, and I go from being a salesperson to being simply a human being. And I like to say that not everybody experiences tragedy, but we all experience misfortune. And again, we want to respond in kind. We want to connect with people. So, but it doesn't have to, this is just my story. And I tell people when we're going over this, you have to, all of the things I'm talking about, you have to leverage your personality. Like with mirroring, if you're someone who speaks with a ton of body language and you're meeting with someone who's very zen, calm, you don't want to make yourself statue still, because that'll just make yourself awkward. So you need to turn all these skills into a personal thing for yourself. So with vulnerability, it doesn't have to be, again, something really heavy, and you need to talk about it at a moment that's appropriate. But it could simply be you arrive to a meeting and there's a sudden downpour, you didn't have an umbrella, and your feet are soaking wet, and you share that. So, that is an example. And because they'll respond and say, oh, that happened to me last week. And it can be something small, complaining about your kid, showing your humanity is what we're talking about here, not, sharing something that would seem like a very wrong emotional thing to be sharing right now, but trying to find ways to showcase your humanity in a genuine, candid, sincere way is a really powerful way to connect with somebody. And in my book, I talk about a spy who was active in the Middle East and very successful. And he knew that in the Middle East, they talk about family a lot in conversation. I guess we do all over, but in particular in the Middle East. And he talked about how his son's on the autism spectrum, and it led him to get closer with a few people who became his agents. So this is a really powerful method to connect with.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate that. And kind of, to touch on our own story, one of the things that we work on when we're, working with business owners and sales professionals is like, sometimes you got to pivot in life, right? Things don't always go exactly according to plan. And, in my own life, my family and I, we sold our big house in Texas about 18 months ago, moved into this fifth wheel RV to start traveling the country and experiencing things. And we got a call in October last year that my father-in-law had stage 4 brain cancer. And so we had to like turn the RV around, drive up to Ohio, park the thing. And there's so many little points to that fit well within the story, because a lot of times people have dealt with something like that in their lives, or someone they're close to has gone through it. So there's that connection there. But to me, it kind of leans in on the ability to create freedom, because had we still had the big house in Texas and done all that, we wouldn't have been able to be here for the people that matter to us. And I know when
Right.
someone's trying to grow in their own life to find that next level, freedom is a big part of that. And being able to understand that you can pivot and you can change and be in a new position that's better off than where you are now. A lot of people, they want to fight against that. They don't want to change, right? People kind of resist change a little bit.
They do, yeah.
And ultimately there's the ability to negotiate with themselves about, okay, I can actually change. I can actually, make this decision to move forward in a different direction and ultimately end up where they want in life, even though it's not the exact path that they thought they would take to get there. And what I'd be interested to know a little bit more about from you, kind of reading through your profile there, is like, negotiating is kind of a tricky thing, whether you're negotiating with a person or trying to get them to negotiate with themselves. Can you expand on the negotiation side a little bit for me?
Yeah, I love talking about this. It gets back to, one of my favorite areas, the world of kidnap for ransom consulting, which is a really fascinating space. I love talking about it. And, I've learned from FBI hostage negotiators, you can think about negotiation. This is a helpful framework, I think, again, with motivation. So you can think about negotiation on a spectrum, right? So at the extreme end, you have what's known as instrumental. So I use the example of like, you're a private equity firm, you're negotiating with someone who built a business all their life. Why? That person is trying to get as much money as they can for their business, right? They have an instrumental goal. In a hostage siege, it's someone who's taken hostages and says, I want to free my compatriots from jail. So it's an instrumental goal. It's quite straightforward. Both sides understand it, right? In the middle, you have what's known as kind of more of an emotional goal, right? The private equity firm's negotiating with a founder who's older, who feels that their name is on the company. They would like the name to stay there. They have employees that have worked for decades there. They want to guarantee a contract that those people will be taken care of. So there's an emotional side to it that goes well beyond the financial side. In the hostage world, it would be someone taking hostages because they just got fired or they were fired the day before and they want to denounce the boss. So the hostage negotiator is trying to express empathy and understanding of that, right? Just to give, and they're great at that. And then the final one is what's known as high risk. And that in the hostage world is someone is acting crazy. Maybe they've been violent. Maybe they have a history of violence. They're not showing an expressive or an instrumental goal. That's when you start thinking about sending in the SWAT team. We're not sending in the SWAT team in the business world, but I think the corollary is walking away from a negotiation where the other side has not been respectful of you and your goals and is not negotiating in good faith. That's what I call high risk. So I've been told that framework is helpful as a way to either start a negotiation or step back and look at one that is difficult, but again, with motivation and again, looking at the other side. I hope that's a helpful thing for you and your listeners to think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great because in sales, it really comes back to figuring out what does the individual want. Are they, in a situation where they're trying to get out of the pain that they're in, and that pain could be the fact that they've spent 25 years of their life trying to build something, and now they've built it, and they're not really sure what's going to happen to their identity once they let it go? Yeah. Is it something where, they made a lot of money and got super greedy, and then things went south, and now all of a sudden they're scrambling and trying to figure out how they're going to keep the lights on? All of these things play into that. And so I think the development of the rapport, showing the empathy, truly digging in and understanding where the other person is coming from, and then your ability to, basically have a conversation that lets them win while you win, and then everybody wins. That's really what sales is all about. It's like, how can I help this person win in a way that helps me win so that everybody feels like they've gotten something out of the deal? And that's really, in a negotiation standpoint, what you're looking for. You don't want one person to have to lose in order for someone else to win, unless they're crazy, and then maybe you got to take them out. But again, we don't do that in the business world, so it's a little bit different there.
It's not a zero-sum game. Well said.
Thank you. And man, we could probably nerd out on this for several hours because I love this conversation. I love the nuance and the psychology behind sales, but I want to be respectful of your time. What's the best way for me and the listener to come find you, follow you, maybe check out your book, some of the other content you put out there? It sounds like you've got some other really cool sales stories in there, and I know I personally want to go check them out.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I mean, read the book. It's available any place you kind of get books, on Amazon and all the other places. It's I read the book, so for the Audible version, you'll be stuck with my voice, but people tell me that's enjoyable. Ebooks, all of that. So the book's a great place to start. My website is sellickaspy.net. Examples of me speaking, some of the stories I've written about this subject in Time and Fast Company and others are there. I'm pretty cynical about social media, but I do post on LinkedIn is where you can find me, and I would urge everybody to connect with me there. And I'm very grateful for you having me and have enjoyed the conversation very much.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here, Jeremy. It's been really insightful. I know that the listeners got some gems. There's been some really nuanced psychology discussion going on here, and I think those that are really trying to take themselves to that next level as communicators, they're going to get a massive amount of value from the show. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
All right, listen, you guys know what to do. If you enjoyed the show, you liked the conversation, share it on social media, put it over on LinkedIn, tag me, tag Jeremy, let the world know you got some value out of it. Maybe send it to somebody who sucks at communicating, right? They need a little bit of help. You don't have to tell them they suck, but just send them this episode and be like, hey, I really enjoyed it. I think you'll get some gems out of it. Let them know that, there's opportunity to grow and learn and get better in their sales career. And as always, leave us a review, share it, subscribe, do all the things. But if you've got your own story and you want to be able to bring some of that to the world and you want to help others see how they can learn and grow through that story and some of the things that you know about sales, I'd love to have you on the show. Head over to callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send us your details. We'll get you scheduled in. We'll bring you on just like my new friend Jeremy, who I'm super excited to go grab his book. And you guys know what to do from here. Go call the damn leads. We'll see you on the next one.
you.